things like that. What would political policies look like that would, I guess, further your agenda?
Right. Because obviously, when I'm talking about pan-Europeanism, this is a kind of, ideal. It's an ideology. It's not what you would want to bring to, say, an average Republican voter or something
Hmm.
like that. Um, I think that we should start. Basically, sorry, someone's unwrapping something. Would you mind not unwrapping something? Um, I think we should start basically where the Trump campaign started, and that is starting with immigration. I think Trump defined his candidacy from the very first moment by talking about immigration, by talking about the wall very early on, and that's what his campaign was about. It became a referendum on, are we a nation or are we not? And I think that's where any kind of future alt-right campaign is going to have to start from. So it would be starting certainly from limiting immigration, and I would say not just illegal immigration. That's something that a lot of people find it fairly easy to oppose. But the fact is, illegal immigration is not really the most impactful in terms of changing the nation. Illegals will come and go very often. Illegals will very often stay in the shadows. They don't really want to be a part of the community. In terms of what is most demographically transformative, it is the mass legal immigration that's been going on since 1965. So I think, I have proposed as something that isn't, my ultimate dream, but is something that I feel is possible. Would be a moratorium on immigration. So basically, we would want net neutral immigration. So the same amount of people who leave would be the same amount of people who come. And we would want to do that for a 50-year period. So it would be basically a mirror image of the some 40-year period from 1924 to 1965, when we had effectively net neutral immigration. It was after a major immigration restriction. And that 40-year period was the time when America became a world power, when America had a sense of itself as a nation, greater than we've ever had. So, I feel like as transformative and as fragmenting as this amount of immigration that we've experienced has been, I think it would be possible to keep this going, to at least not fragment the nation worse with a net neutral immigration plan. I think that's something that could appeal to people. So something like that. Now, in a lot of other things, I think that we should adopt the Bernie Sanders platform, to be honest. And I mean that absolutely seriously. I think that the idea of when Republicans almost brag about not caring for the environment, of, oh, look, I'm going to go drive my SUV, isn't this hilarious? Take that, liberals. I just can only cringe. I think that true conservatives are people who do care about the environment, who are interested in reaching innovative and technological solutions to the environmental degradation. I would say a major light rail system to build public transportation as opposed to relying on cars and planes and so on. I think these could be amazing things. I think it was basically Republicans and right-wingers who established the national parks. I think we should do more of that. That would be a kind of greatness agenda that I wish Trump would do, as opposed to getting into all this climate change denial and tax cuts and things like that. I think also we need to start appealing to young people and not baby boomers who have basically had their chance at life and have pretty much failed us all. So I think we should be running on a platform in terms of education, of forgiveness of college loan debt, and I think we should run on a platform of having less people attend college. College, in my opinion, should be a place for the cognitive elite. It is not some place that we want to bring the entire public under the age of 25 so that they can, get their minds screwed up on post-Marxism and end up with 100K in debt and working at the Gap.
There's a big uproar this week about an interview on YouTube where a conservative YouTuber, Roaming Millennial, did a 3-part interview with Richard Spencer. I mentioned in my last video that I had a hard time pushing back against Ghazi Koto the way that I wanted to, at least initially when I was first doing research for the video and watching his channel. And it took some effort, and it took some critical reasoning to get to a point where I could see past the form of what he was saying to the substance of what he was saying. I'm making this video as a postscript to my last video, Lingua Franca, because, I think that Roaming Millennial is encountering the same obstacle, I think, but she kind of didn't clear it, because she did not... Firstly, she didn't disagree with Richard Spencer through her entire interview with him, and it was 60 minutes long. And she is a mixed-race woman, and she is not a person under the principles of Richard Spencer's philosophy. She is not a complete person. They have a lot of very toxic language around miscegenation. I can't believe that, like, basic, the impulse to survive, self-preservation didn't kick in for her to go, but what happens to me when you become king and your movement has the run of the road? That didn't seem to occur to her. And I don't think that Roaming Millennial is a Nazi sympathizer. I don't think that she realizes. Again, she seems to be blinded by the fact that Richard Spencer is telling her what she wants to hear. She seems unwilling or incapable of going beyond the packaging and really pressing. What do you mean? What does this mean? Is this possible? Is this person selling you a bill of goods? And this is unfortunately one of those situations where being naive on a subject is dangerous in general. Because people in Roaming Millennial's audience who were already somewhat sympathetic to Richard Spencer, but were alienated by his ideas as presented by other people, his ideas as presented by people perhaps that they don't trust, his ideas as presented by people like me who they aren't interested in listening to, because I use the word Nazi to refer to the guy. They don't want to hear my interpretation of what Richard Spencer has to say. They might trust Roaming Millennial, and Richard Spencer knows how to tailor his talking points for an audience. He really does know how to make himself sound like one of us, whoever you are. He has somebody he has a talking point for everyone. You're a leftist? Oh, well, I support environmentalism. I support single-payer healthcare. Look at all these things we have in common. Maybe my ideas aren't so bad. Oh, you're a right-winger? Oh, well, I support religious freedom. I'm against mass immigration. Maybe we have something in common. Maybe my ideas aren't so crazy. That's the hustle. And can't understand this rush of people virtue signaling on the backs of, I talk to someone I disagree with. I mean, that can have some value, but you have to actually disagree with them. I would have, you know what? I would have been perfectly fine if Roaming Millennial brought Spencer on and just was impartial. Wasn't cordial, but wasn't hostile, right? I'm not asking that she punches the guy in the face. I'm just asking her to do what a journalist does and get the facts and not allow, interviewing is very much so about challenging your subject and making sure that your platform, that your bona fides, your journalistic credibility is not being used as a means to an end. If you want to look at something very similar, the Fox News interviews, right? Fox News interviews are basically infomercials. They're infomercials for the Republican Party, and to an extent, MSNBC also is a bunch of infomercials for the Democratic Party. Cable news has been, completely bereft of integrity for a long time. How is that relevant to this topic? Well, here's how it's relevant to this topic. All I saw Roaming Millennial do was disagree with Richard Spencer just enough to let him make his pitch. So, if you had an impartial interviewer, right? They're not just going to go, people say your ideas are racist. Are they racist, Richard? It's too soft. It's too soft. She had a responsibility to her audience to really get in there and challenge the repercussions of his ideas. She let him get away with proposing resegregation in the United States of America just because he didn't present it that way. She let him get away with anything that he wanted to say, any atrocious thing he wanted to propose, as long as he said it just the right way. In the way that made sense to her, in the way that spoke to her principles. And in addition to that, it spoke to her audience's principles. So, there are a lot of people in the white nationalist movement who came there from libertarianism. Because the white nationalists made it sound like white nationalism was the end point of these libertarian ideas. And that's where the peril is that somebody in Roaming Millennial's audience who is already on the fence, but has some degree of gag factor going on with the ideas of Richard Spencer, he knows who he's talking to, and he is going to exploit the fact that Roaming Millennial's audience trusts her so that they can trust him. He keeps repeating over and over again in the interview. He keeps on talking about people being receptive to his ideas, and he's mentioned in tweets before. He's mentioned people like Sargon being entry points. You know what an entry point means to Richard Spencer? It means someone who's not a white nationalist and does not support the end goal of an ethno-state being a means, a tool. So Sargon's audience doesn't support white nationalism, but they support Sargon. And when he does these softball interviews with millennial woes, and he hasn't spoken to Richard Spencer yet, but we're counting down to it. And when he does these pity-pat comebacks, what was fascinating to me is that none of these fucking people would be this charitable to a social justice warrior, right? A social justice warrior. There's no fucking way that they would let a social justice warrior get away with talking about non-binary genders unchallenged. They would never let a social justice warrior get away with talking about feminism unchallenged. They would never let someone from our side off the hook like that. And it's not just about tribalism. What confounds me about this entire thing is that, roaming millennial's side of the conversation just sees this as harmless. The guy platformed for resegregation. The guy platformed for forced deportation. And forced deportation is half of the equation with internment. Right? Meaning that if you're not willing to leave when we ask you to, we're going to confine you. In order to achieve segregation, it's going to have to happen with someone leaving or someone being confined. We need to start putting this phrase, white nationalism, up to the lens and really start calling it what it is, which is resegregation. Particularly in the United States of America, these are people who are advocating for resegregation. I think that if Richard Spencer's ideas, which are very, very old and very, very exhausted, if he presented his ideas honestly, if he presented himself as a neo-Confederate, if he presented himself as a pro-segregationist, these people would not entertain his perspective. It is because the triumph of Richard Spencer is that he has fully adapted to political correctness. Ideas that don't lend themselves to polite discourse. That it makes him more dangerous than David Duke, who tried that and couldn't pull it off. That makes him more dangerous than Millennial Woes, who still dabbles in some of that stuff. What really makes Richard Spencer dangerous is that he's a fucking politician. And the people that we need to push back against politicians are journalists. And I got to tell you, the YouTube skeptic community is failing on the level of journalistic integrity. And we need the people who have the numbers and the eyeballs on this platform to spread accurate information. So no, you don't have to bite Richard Spencer's dick off when you have a conversation with him. I do that, but that's why I don't have a conversation with the guy, because I wouldn't be able to stop myself from biting his dick off angrily. But you also don't kiss his ass. You also don't let him off the hook. You don't have any fealty to political correctness, but you have an obligation to your audience, and you have an obligation to the facts. And the facts are against separate but equal.